Hi, I'm Amy from the Northern Ireland Science Festival. Welcome to our digital programme. This is our three-part series on the past, present and future of the linen industry in Northern Ireland. If you like what you see, remember to hit that subscribe button.
So linen is a product of the flax plant. Flax was grown in Ireland, usually planted in May, pulled in August. It was known colloquially as the wee blue blossom because of the colours of the flowers. So when the flax plant is pulled, it's retted, it's scotched to go through the various processes and eventually spun. So the fibres of the flax plant are extracted and spun into yarn, and yarn is used in all sorts of applications, but largely in weaving. So Ireland has a long history of linen production in the first millennium and the second millennium. But the linen industry as we know it really kicks off in the mid-17th century with the movement of English and Scottish settlers into Ulster. Throughout the 18th century, the linen industry thrives. We have bleachers along the Lagan Valley. We have the domestic linen industry with spinners outside their cottages producing linen yarn. And at the end of the 18th century, linen is a really important industry. In fact, it's about 60% of all Ireland's exports. Throughout the 19th century, the situation changes. The domestic industry falls aside, and we have the rise of the industrial linen industry from spinning industry through to weaving, particularly from the mid-19th century onwards. By the First World War and the end of the First World War, the linen industry has really hit its zenith, and they say that the war was won on Ulster linen wings because the whole industry in the north had turned its focus to the production of linen aircraft fabric. So the story of Hilden is really a story of the Barbour family. They were a Scottish family and they moved to a site just outside Lisburn in the 1780s where they started producing linen thread. And this was under the patronage of John Barbour and his sons, particularly John Jr. and William. After John's death, John Jr. took over. Sadly he died, and William, the second son, he consolidated the business at a site down by the River Lagan. It's a former bleach green owned by the De Lashua family, and that's the present site of Hilden Mill today. By 1837, he has the largest thread works in all of Ireland, and by the end of the century, it's the largest linen thread company in the entire world. They had about 2,000 or 3,000 employees and branches in Germany, Belfast, and the United States. So in the mid-19th century, the site at Hilden was around 34 acres, but it grew even larger than that. And across the site, different processes were carried out in different buildings. We had the rougher part, working with the flax, to the main mill building, where you're spinning flax and then spinning the flax into yarn and twisting the thread, to the dye house, where they're dyeing the threads. So Barbour's had a fleet of lighters or barges that travelled up and down the Lagan, bringing coal for use in the various steam engines in the mill. At the other end, they had a fleet of trucks that would go out across Ireland with the signature red hat on the side of a truck and bringing the Barbour products to other manufacturers, shops, things like that. They also had a siding, part of the siding at Hilden Halt, and they used the train there to get products down to Belfast port. Towards the end of the 19th century, Barbour's at Hilden brought all their companies together from Germany to the United States, and they created the Linen Thread Company, which was the largest linen thread company in the world. They had branches and agencies all over the world. So at various times throughout the company's 200-year history, they employed thousands of people. Men were usually involved in the dirtier part of the job, so they'd be involved in processing the flax. Women would work with the machines. And at one stage, they would have had children on half-time contracts, half-time in school, half-time in the factory. So although William Barbour started producing linen thread at the site in the early 19th century, the buildings that you see today largely date from the mid-19th century with various additions. And at Hilden they produced all sorts of products, all different variations of linen thread, and they had all sorts of uses. Barbour's brand name was known worldwide and its products were ubiquitous. They made all sorts of things, from products for shoemakers, tailors, bookbinders, material that went into golf clubs or telephone cables, as well as material for weavers. In the latter half of the 20th century, the linen industry began to decline. There was greater competition from the Far East and there was less demand, particularly as man-made fabrics became more important. The factory at Hilden eventually closed in 2006. The Barbers, however, have left a rich legacy in the Lisburn area and the wider Lisburn area. At Hilden itself, we have Hilton School, which is currently undergoing redevelopment, and it was known as one of the first integrated schools in Northern Ireland. We've also left a number of buildings, playgrounds, sports fields across the Lisburn area, and they contributed greatly to civic life in Lisburn and across Northern Ireland. Sir Millen Barbour, for one, he was one-time director of the Linen Thread Company. He was Minister of Finance in the Northern Ireland government. Although the linen industry has declined, and there's great sadness for the decline of this once great industry, like there's huge interest in its history, in its past, and the legacy that the mill and the mill owners left to these areas, particularly in Lisburn.